Hello everyone, for today's video I'm going to show you how you can paint this beautiful watercolor style window overlooking Tuscan countryside in Procreate. I'll help and guide you through each step and give you my favorite tricks and techniques to bring this beautiful painting to life. No matter where you are in your journey, whether you're just starting out or already advanced, these insights will help you elevate your skills to the next level. You can find the exact brushes and canvases in the description below. You can download the free stamp and color palettes there as well. For today's demonstration, I'll be using the rough groove textured canvas. For this painting, we're going to focus on the outer layers and then move inwards, and then add some small details. As you can see, I have already imported my stamp here, which is going to be underneath the watercolor texture canvases, and we'll begin painting underneath that stamp. So to start off, we're going to pick a light brown tone color. You can use the same colors that I'm using by using the color palettes here. So we're going to keep the size to around 20% and the opacity at 100%, and we're going to use the flat brush. We'll focus on painting the wooden areas of the windows first. And just like this, follow along and go all the way up and down to the side and around the windows. It's okay to go over the lines because the style we're looking for is like a light line wash style, so it's okay to be not so perfect. And we could always go back and use the eraser tool to remove certain areas of the painting. And we're going to reduce the size to around 8% and focusing on the smaller areas in the center of the window. And do the same thing on the other side of the window. As you can see, the inside of the window is also made out of wood, so we're going to use the same texture color, the light brown tone color, but a bit darker because it is a bit more inside, so we're going to increase in depth. One of the key ways to show depth is through colors, either a lighter tone or a darker tone. And that's why we're going to use a darker tone color here. So just go along the lines all the way across, all the way down to the bottom of the window. And also the bottom piece. So we're going to increase the size to around 20% now because the window is a bit bigger at the bottom. And just roughly paint over them just like this. I really enjoyed the previous video I did of the bakery, and I wanted to do something with landscapes and also an animal that I really love. At the same time, I was watching a lot of traveling videos to Italy because I do want to go back to Italy and explore more areas. Now I do want to add a little bit more depth into the wooden texture look. So what we're going to do is pick a darker tone and decrease the size to around 10% and focusing on the areas of the corners, just like this window side, where there will be less light coming through in this area. Same thing on the left side. And also the bottom piece of the window. And darkening some of the insides of the window. Now, once we're done with that, we can now use the eraser. And I like to use the fine line brush this time to erase some of the brown textured wooden areas to clean up the areas here. And this is great because I'm working in multiple layers and can remove and add throughout the painting process. Now we can paint the glass window part using the same layer. And we're going to pick a light blue tone color. And I'm going to use the rough wash brush And I'm going to keep the opacity to around 35%. And I want to put some reflections just like this. And I like to leave some of the blank areas of the painting to mimic that realistic watercolor style effect. And we're finished with the window. Now we can work on the inside of the brick. Now picking the red tone color for the brick, it's going to be a bit darker than the wooden texture. And now I'm going to use the flat brush again, but we're going to create a new layer so we can work in multiple layers and erase without ruining the other parts of the layers. And we're going to keep the size to around 25% and go from the inside and outwards, and we're just going to paint just like this. Don't worry going over the lines, we can always go and erase it. But just focusing on layering just like a brick layer. And it is pressure sensitive, so we can use a lighter pressure to fill in some of the white spots here. And use the eraser tool again, and now we're going to focus on erasing the outer parts, just like this. This technique gives a nice brick layer effect with a lot of texture. And now we can move towards the inside of the painting and go to the bottom and focusing on the sky first. So let's create a new layer. And we can use the same blue tone color that we used for the windows and keeping the opacity to around 35% and the size to around 40%. Using the flat brush, we can fill it in just like this. And now we're going to put a little bit of layers to darken the sky. To do this, we're going to make it a little darker now. And we're going to paint over it just like this and making the top parts a bit darker than the bottom parts. And we can even increase the opacity to make it even darker. And with that, we can use the fast blender to blend the colors together, keeping the size to around 20% and just simply blending them just like this. And we can use the eraser tool again to clean up the areas in the top to eliminate any over paintings. Now I'm going to focus on lightening up the clouds to enhance the look. To do this, I'm going to use the eraser tool and use the soft blush and lighten up the clouds. So keeping the size to around 10%. And we're going to erase some of the blues that we had before. Now to further enhance the clouds, I'm going to create a new layer and use the fine line brush. And keeping the size to around 25%, I'm just going to put a small layer of the top of the clouds to get a better contrast between the clouds and the background. So on the left side as well too. And from there, I'm going to use the regular blender and size to around 25%. And we're going to push the pigment outwards, going up to give a nice transition and smoother colors. This will give a nice contrast with the clouds to enhance that look that you want. Now to focus on the background of the mountains, to create a natural illusion of distance, we're going to use a cooler blue tone on the furthest mountain that we can see. And as we get closer, it's going to be a bit more greener. So we're going to use a nice light blue tone color, and we're going to pick the rough wash brush and keeping the opacity to around 45% and then size to 100%. This will give a nice faded blue tone color to give a distance and depth illusion. In reality, as distance increases, particles in the air scatter light slightly, giving that washed out look, which may appear a bit cooler with less intense colors. Gradual color changes to cooler to warmer helps to guide the viewer's eye naturally through the scene, enhancing the three-dimensional feel. I'm also going to add a small layer of darker tone colors to give a little bit more depth and character to the mountains. The colors will gradually change to a bit more intense green, so we're going to use a bit of an emerald color between the green and the blue. And just like this, keeping the same size, filling the mid areas of the mountain. And don't worry about filling over the trees because we can use the eraser tool to eliminate them. Again, we're going to add some character by adding some more texture, darker pigment into the mountains, giving slight grooves. Now let's focus on the most intense, closest part of the landscape, which is in front of us, and it's going to be an intense green. So we're going to use the green color here, and keeping the same rough brush that we used before, and just fill in the general area. Don't worry about painting over the trees, because we can erase them, and don't worry about the cat. The cat's not going to be green. Now I'm going to add another pigment of darkness to add a bit more character again, to show the viewer that there are some depths and grooves of the mountains behind the trees as well. And now we can use the eraser tool again and use the fine line brush. And we can erase some of the roads and the trees, because the trees are going to be a bit darker and the roads are going to be a little bit lighter with beige tone. And we're just going to erase all along the roads. And some of the bushes in the back of the house and some trees in the back as well. You can take the time to paint just the landscape and avoid painting, but this is a very quick and fun way to do it as well, where you can just erase after the fact. Erasing the side of the windows, and as I promised, cats won't be green in this video. And now we can go back and focus on the details of the outer areas of the painting. So we'll start with the blanket here. So we're going to create a new layer. And we're going to pick a yellow beige light tone color. And we're we're going to stick with the flat brush and decrease the opacity to around 40% and size to around 50%. And fill in the general area, just like this, and decrease the size for smaller areas to reach it. And once the blanket is filled out, we can now use the red tone color, use the flat brush this time with the opacity 100% and size to around 3%. And we're just going to draw the lines just like this. And since the lines are going to get smaller because the distance of the blanket is getting further, we're going to reduce it while we get there. And we could always go and erase it so you don't have to worry too much. You could also use the smooth wash brush for this, but I like to use the flat brush for easy, fast paintings. So again, I'm using the eraser tool to clean up some of the areas that I went over a little bit, just like this. Now once that is completed, I'm going to work on the cat. So for the cat, we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to pick a light orange color to paint the cat, and we're going to use this smooth wash brush first, opacity to around 40% and size around 60%, and we're going to paint the cat from the tail and all the way, and we're going to leave some of the whites of the palms to give a little bit of character with the cat, rather than just all orange, and also leaving the face some parts empty. Now we can create a new layer and pick a darker tone using the rough edge brush and reducing the opacity slightly and focusing on some of the back area of the cat and some parts of the face to get a little bit of texture look of the cat. You can try making the cat with different colors, but this is what I want it to look like. And there you have it, simple cat. And don't forget the ears. We're going to have to give a little bit of a pink color to its ears. We can always use the fine line brush this time to get a bit more detail. And just like this, giving a little bit of those jelly bean feet. And now we can work on the flower. So we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to use the same pink tone color that we use for the cat's ears and around 58% opacity, and just fill in the area of the flowers. And it's important to limit the color palette in the painting because it provides a more unified look, helping colors work together rather than competing with one another. And we can go a little bit darker to enhance the depth of the flowers, like going a little bit darker. Again, we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to focus on creating some of the green leaves. And using the same leaves, green color that we used for the background, we're going to now use the smooth wash brush, and I'll save this color for you guys. And keeping the opacity to around 60%, focusing on the light tones, and then we're going to add some dark tones into it. But just fill in the general area. And we can increase the opacity to make it a little bit darker, rather than focusing on changing the color palettes again. And focusing on the inside of the leaves. Now we can change the color palette to be a bit more darker green now, again, to darken and add some textures. Simple flowers completed. Now we can focus on the vase. We're going to use the same beige yellow tone color that we used before for the blanket. Increase the size to around 20%, 100% opacity, and we're going to use the smooth wash brush. And just like this, we're going to fill it out. To create some more depth, we can now create a new layer and go a little bit darker using the rough edge brush. Having the opacity increase slightly, having the opacity to around 60%, and creating some of that textures and the shadows on the left side to give it a bit more depth and value. And I can increase the opacity to make it a little bit more darker. The rough edge brush works great if you paint on top of the layers by creating a new layer. And that's one of the reasons why I create new layers sometimes, to enhance that watercolor texture look. Now we can focus on the center of the scenic background. So we're going to create a new layer and create a dark tone color for the green for the trees to enhance that look, to make it really pop. Keeping the same rough brush that we used before and just go along the lines of the trees. And now, after drawing them, they kind of look like upside down carrots. So don't use the orange color that you're tempted to use, just use the green. Unless you want some funky looking carrots sticking out from the ground. And that's the important part with art, is that you gotta trust yourself and you gotta trust the process, because sometimes it may look a little bit funky, but you just have to try it out, believe in yourself and trust the process, and you may create something beautiful, and sometimes you may create something fantastic. And comment down below what you guys want to see more, scenic or architecture. I really enjoy the whole scenic and adding building textures. And now to add a bit more darker tone, we're going to use the rough edge brush to give that little bit of a watercolor stain look, focusing on the left side because the light is coming more towards where that background is. So there will be a bit more shadows. And don't worry too much with adding the shadows. That's what we will do later on, near the end. Now we're going to create the road. Now use the same tone that we used for the vase of the flowers, and we're going to pick the flat brush this time, keeping the opacity to 100% and size to around 25%. And we're going to create a new layer because we can erase it later on and simply go along the lines. We will go back and erase them, but this is a much faster way to get this done. Again, we're going to use the eraser tool to erase it. Now we're going to focus on the building. Use a smooth wash brush, using the same color that we used for the road, and paint the house. You can definitely go with a blue roof or a green roof, but sometimes you need a bit more color variation, and that red really pops out from the flowers to the roof of the house. A key takeaway from this painting is keeping the paint color palettes controlled, because it also allows you to paint faster because you simply have color palettes there and ready to go. Now we're going to create a rough texture look of the road. So we're going to create a new layer and use a darker tone color, and I'll save this for you guys. And we're going to decrease the opacity to around 60% and use the rough hard edge brush. And just parts of the areas of the road to give a bit texture look, making the road look less flat, and some textures of the shadows of the building as well. And now we're going to add some shadows. So we're going to create a new layer and pick a blue tone color using the rough hard edge brush and keeping the opacity to around 30 to 40% and size to around 50%. And we're going to start off with adding some dark shadows of the windows, focusing on the inside of the window because the shadows will be casting where the window wooden area is blocking the window slightly. So just follow along like this, creating a bit more depth and realism to the art piece. A little bit more shadows on the vase because the window is shining towards us. and also the sides of the vase and the flowers. Increase the opacity slightly so we can paint the underneath the windowsill, and also some parts of the cat underneath the blanket. And also the bottom piece of the window. And also, to create some more depth, I'm going to create some shadows on the inside of the window just like this. And along the side of the doors as well. And don't forget underneath the blanket. And the window. This will really enhance and make the painting really pop out of like a 3D version. We're going to zoom in slightly and increase the opacity to around 40%, and now focusing on the shadows of the trees. By simply adding some of these shadows, it really enhances that look of that 3-dimension look, especially in the buildings because the light is coming towards the building from the mountains. It gives a nice perception rather than making it look so flat. The roads are up on the mountains high, and the mountains are going upwards. And also creating some casting shadows of the mountains will give a nice texture look, looking less flat and more raised look, especially in the mountains in the back. Now I want to add some background color to the painting because it kind of looks like the window's just floating in the air, which I don't want. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a layer and put the layer at the most bottom layer that we have and use that white, yellow, beige look that we have here to create a wall stain look. So use the flat brush, keeping the size at 100% and the opacity to around 35-40%. And just like this, we're going to paint around the window to give a nice background wall. And there you have it, a beautiful countryside Tuscan scenic window view. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel so you'll be notified when a new video tutorial comes out. And if you want to continue painting with me, hit the next video and I'll see you there.